Crested geckos are one of the easiest pets that you can get, but there are things that you can do that can kill them, and it's something you probably want to avoid. Today we're going to cover those different things that will kill your crested gecko. The first one is really important, and it's easily overlooked because the directions are often seem really straightforward. And that is humidity. So a crested gecko comes from New Caledonia, and it's warm, but not hot, and humid there. Their humidity is usually 60 to 80%, and we often tell people to mist their crested gecko enclosures twice a day. They'll say mist it in the morning, mist it in the evening, and you're all good. But that blanket advice can be really bad, because the truth is that you want your enclosure to dry off during the day. Depending on your humidity in your house, in your enclosure, in your substrate, there are a lot of factors that can make it so that you shouldn't be misting morning and night. When we lived in Myrtle Beach, I misted every other day because it took that long for everything to dry out before I missed it again. You want the humidity to drop. Usually it takes to about 50% for things to dry off, and then you raise that humidity back up. If you live in a dry place, that might actually mean misting every morning and every night. Here in central North Carolina, we mist about every night, rather than misting every twice a day. And I no longer do it every other day. I highly recommend the Govee. That is a hygrometer and a thermometer. It will keep track of what the humidity is, and if you place it in your enclosure, then it will keep track of the humidity in your enclosure. This one is keeping track of the humidity and the temperature in my reptile room, and it sends the information to your phone, so it'll let you know when your humidity is getting low, and then you can mist accordingly instead of just blanket misting. Too much mist is also bad because it promotes fungal growth. The next thing that you can do that can kill your gecko is to get them too warm. It's easy to think that your gecko needs a lot of cool lights and a temperature gradient, and all of that can be helpful depending on your room temp, but these guys are really sensitive, so a lot of times it's better to avoid a lot of warmth for them. So if your room temperature is average, somewhere around 72 to 75 degrees, then you don't actually want to provide them with a lot of heat. You also want to make sure that you're measuring the surface temps of the things in the cage if you put a light on there, so that things are not getting above 80 degrees, and that the ambient temp at the bottom is still in the low to mid 70s. These guys can die from too much heat, and too much heat is actually easier to kill them than too much cold. Next up is diet, and this depends on how you treat their diet. If you are buying Pangea or Repashy and feeding them mostly that with some bugs mixed in, not mixed into the food, but like offered, with calcium, then you don't have anything to worry about diet-wise. Hey buddy, turn your head. They want to look at the front half of you. There you go. If you are trying to save money and experimenting with your own mixes, if you are buying fruit from the store and feeding that to them, or if you are doing baby food, then the diet can actually kill them, and over time they can get metabolic bone disease and all sorts of really sad things. So I definitely recommend sticking with a high quality food like Pangea or Repashy. Next up is an interesting one, because it kind of goes against what a lot of people say. So, and that is, you can give your crested gecko, especially your crested gecko baby, Spike here is full grown, but they come out super small, and you can give your baby crested gecko too large of an enclosure. So if you give them a large enclosure and don't provide a lot of clutter, you'll be able to find your baby and monitor it. but you won't be offering it a secure place, and it isn't likely to eat very well. It can also be a lot harder for it to find its food if it has a large enclosure, because they don't seem to actively seek out their food. It's more like they stumble across their food. If you are providing it with a large enclosure that's full of lots of clutter, then it'll feel secure, and it's even more likely to eat as long as it's finding that food. However, it's really, really hard to monitor its health or whether or not it's eating, because you can't find the gecko as well in the enclosure. So it can be really, really helpful to keep a baby in a smaller enclosure. Next up, I wanted to briefly talk about cohabitation. A lot of people want to cohabit their geckos, usually just because having two seems cooler than having one. And it's easier to keep one enclosure and to take care of one enclosure. However, cohabbing often leads to one of the geckos dying. Usually this doesn't happen from fights from crested geckos, but it'll be that one gecko will eat all the food and the other gecko will go hungry until it starves to death. And I've heard this story so many times, because the truth is that you really shouldn't be cohabbing your geckos, period. Crested geckos are super jumpy, and I like to tell people that they're really durable, and they are really durable. We've had a number of geckos hit the floor and make terrible noises and then, be just fine. However, falls can kill your gecko, so you do want to try to make sure that they're not falling from high distances, that they're not falling down the stairs, or they're not hitting hard objects. Getting to know your gecko can help a lot. Spike here is usually pretty good. Occasionally he'll fling himself out into middle of nowhere, so you do have to keep an eye on him. But he prefers to jump to the chest and then climb onto my back. Look around here. If your gecko does fall, I would definitely recommend monitoring its behavior and its food intake and its poop. Although you should be monitoring those things anyway, to make sure that it didn't sustain any injuries. And if anything changes, either with its behavior or with its eating and pooping, I would highly recommend taking your animal to a vet to make sure that there isn't something wrong. That's another area that people fail, and it can lead to deaths, and that is doing health checks. And so this can cover the eating problems. So if you aren't keeping an eye on your gecko regularly, then you might not know whether or not it's eating and pooping. It can be stuck shed or food stuck to their feet. They get food stuck on their feet a lot, and then that can lead to infection, and that can cause problems. And with that is the infection. Your gecko can get both bacterial and fungal infections if their enclosure isn't clean enough. And if you aren't monitoring things, it can go downhill really, really fast. So it's a really good idea to, have your hands and your eyes on your gecko regularly. It is a good idea to make sure that you're taking good care of their enclosure and that it's clean. It's not like outside where they can go further away from the mess or where there is nature to clean it up. Finally, there is an element where where you get your gecko from is going to determine how healthy your gecko is from the get-go and how strong its genes are. So if you buy your gecko for $50 from PetSmart or Petco, you are getting a gecko that was mass-produced in a factory-type setting, and nobody ever really took care of that gecko, so it's just a matter of whether or not it survived. And then it was shipped to the store, where usually there's somebody who cares about the animals there, but it may or may not be getting proper care. And then you brought it home, and you're hoping for the best. Now, it might not, they probably didn't put a lot of thought into who they were breeding to mass produce geckos. And the truth is that crested geckos do survive a lot of things, and they're easy to breed. And they'll breed a lot of it, they'll produce a lot of babies in a year. So it can be, anybody can breed them. And that can make it so that they aren't getting the care that they need, and they didn't come from a place that you really want to get your gecko from. Now, it might cost more to get them from a breeder who is spending regular amounts of time with them, who's making sure they get fed on a good schedule, is making sure they live in a clean enclosure. All of those things take a lot of time and a lot of energy. So you could go buy a gecko for 20 bucks on somebody's table, or you could buy from someone who is probably doing a better job taking care of them and spend usually at least 3 digits. So this has been Spike, and I'm Danielle with Danielle's Critters. I would love it if you subscribed, and I'll be having lots more content about crested geckos, gargoyle geckos, and a bunch of other critters that we're breeding here at Danielle's Critters.